You alluded at the start to other documentaries lambasting incels, and that seems to be much more commonplace. There's this fear-mongering around incels, and it's usually a convenient catch-all phrase used by the media. And you see this with loads of different groups, right? They just get lumped together for the convenience of a news article. Why do you think Adolescence did it differently? Is it maybe reflective of where the culture is at, or is it just a personal preference by the writers, the director?
I think what the writers were careful to do is take on the perspective of trying to get inside the psychology of the young man who became captured by this ideology and all the different reasons from his psychology that may have led to him to ultimately stabbing his female classmate. It highlights the kind of the pressure for a young man in the modern world to give the impression that they're sexually successful. So even though he was just 13, and the cop in the program said, "What 13-year-old isn't an incel?" But maybe in the modern world, exposed to the internet and this idea that one of the I thought it was a brave decision for the writers to suggest that one of the kind of triggers for him to actually kill the girl was that he was being bullied by her, and she was calling him an incel online, and that incel can function as an insult to just a 13-year-old boy, kind of speaks to this idea that maybe being exposed to the manosphere type content puts a pressure on a young boy to kind of give the impression that they're sexually successful, or that they're going to be. In the interview with the main character and the psychiatrist, he even goes to the extent of making up lies about how sexually successful he's been in the past with other girls and how confident he is on that front. But at the same time, he displays insecurities about feeling ugly. He's kind of acknowledges that she seems like a pretty woman, with the implicit kind of suggestion that life is maybe easy for her because of that.
Well, I want to get into all of that in great depth. But first, what actually is an incel definitionally? Is there a minimum age limit on this? Because I think there's more nuance to it, but what the copper says about all 13-year-olds being incels, I think that there is some truth to that as well.
Yeah. So incel stands for involuntary celibate, but what we mean when we say incels is typically the online subculture. So the online subculture are a group of men who hang around in online forums and who form a strong sense of identity around their perceived inability to form sexual or romantic relationships. Often delves into very misogynistic rhetoric. There's a whole kind of ideology and belief system around this, which is mostly typified by the black pill, which describes what incels see as the particularly bleak truth to accept, that they believe they never stood a chance in the romantic realm, and they were never going to find a partner, and primarily because they perceive themselves as ugly. They think that women prioritize looks above all else, and that they never stood a chance. There's other elements to the wider manosphere, which is more kind of red pill and blue pill. So red pill describes waking up to see reality as it really is and women's true nature as they might depict it. And blue pill describes kind of the blissful ignorance of normies who are not familiar with how things really work. This is how incels might see it. So there's a lot going on there. Incels is just the really dark tip of the spear compared to the wider manosphere too. But yeah, you're right. Most 13-year-old boys, when your sexuality is developing, you do find yourself more involuntarily celibate than you might like. But it's just about whether this takes hold and becomes an identity, and you wrap the ideological beliefs and the misogyny all around it. That's where it becomes a problem.
So could you have a 7-year-old incel? It seems like there's no line if there's no sort of minimum age limit. Is it based on the fact that you have the intention of having sex but can't? What is it? Where's the line?
So it depends on whether you characterize it by just your circumstance. You do find yourself in the circumstance of being involuntary celibate, and that might apply to a lot more men than just the online subculture. But for me, it's impossible to prove that someone can't form a sexual or romantic relationship.
Sure.
So then for me, it becomes the important part becomes the identity element. Do you identify with this part of your circumstance? And then on a higher level than that, do you buy into the online subculture, the belief system, the rhetoric, the misogyny, and sometimes the violence? So, there's kind of levels to it. But in the case of the young boy, yes, it's perfectly understandable for a 13-year-old developing his sexuality to not to find themselves as an incel. But I think what the show was trying to depict was that young boys now find themselves with an extra pressure to have sexual success earlier, or to show that they're the type of person that's going to. The fact that incel can still function as an insult to a 13-year-old kind of speaks to that modern pressure. And I think that's what that scene or that episode was trying to capture. The psychiatrist, on the one hand, you could say she was somewhat trying to pathologize typical developing male sexuality and insecurities around that.
Yeah.
And maybe trying to paint the picture that he had his brain pornified by pornography and all of this. But I think what it was really trying to get at is that this online world of the manosphere has put that pressure on young men, that it's more important than ever that they prove their masculinity, so to speak. And I think the suggestion was that he was trying to prove his masculinity by showing he was sexually successful, the type of man who would be desired, or the type of man that wouldn't accept it if he was insulted in that way. So it is getting at I think one of the main parts of the modern problem that young boys maybe find themselves in.